How many of you are familiar at all with the Lake Apopka issue? Okay, well then let me give you a little bit of an introduction to those who do not know about it. Lake Apopka is second or third, I've read two different accounts, the second or third largest lake in the state. In the 1940s, it was a beautiful lake that people came from around the world and for bass fishing, the largemouth bass. It is now the most polluted lake in the state. Where in the 40s you could see straight to the bottom of the lake, now I don't think you can see an inch. I mean, seriously, that's about it. And millions of dollars have gone into cleanup of the lake, of trying to discover what caused the pollution. 1,000 birds died in one migrating season. $1 million went into a study for that. A lot has gone into restoration of the land, trying to bring back the wildlife, trying to clean up the lake. But in the meantime, there is one group that has largely been ignored. These are the individuals, the people who worked on the farms and who suffer the same problems as the lake because of the same reasons, the toxins and the phosphorus and all of this. When the birds died in late 1998, the farm workers became extremely nervous. The EPA spent $1 million on a study to determine the cause of the deaths. The results of that study were not published until 2000. The study concluded that the deaths had occurred from ingesting pesticide-contaminated fish. Well, what about us, the farm workers asked. We were exposed to the same chemicals. We eat fish from the lake. Once the EPA had linked the bird deaths to high levels of pesticide exposure, the farm workers began to clearly articulate what they wanted: an official health study to determine whether those chemicals found in the birds were present in their own bodies. And if so, they wanted to know what it would mean for their health. They had valid questions, and they were seeking real answers. And so the farm workers who had spent their lives bent over the earth, following orders from crew leaders and farmers, stood up, and they advocated for themselves. They held community meetings asking lawmakers to come hear their cause. They formed a task force. They asked, without much success, to participate in committees with the officials who were making decisions that directly impacted their lives. They took their issues to the media, and they spoke in front of news cameras that broadcast their situation through Central Florida. They drove 5 hours to Tallahassee and back again in the same day to lobby in front of state representatives. And at meetings between environmentalists and water managers who gathered to discuss lake restoration and farmland cleanup, the farm workers waved handwritten signs. What about the farm workers? They accepted invitations to step onto platforms at environmental conferences and universities and law schools, and despite their lack of a high school education in many cases, they relayed their stories to PhDs and JDs. They created these beautiful quilts, and each square is a memory of someone who passed away. And yet, they've been ignored. As Jeannie said, they have not received any money whatsoever. So to me, that as I say, that was just chapter 1 of my book. What I wanted to do is ask the question, well, what about the people? And so I interviewed 11 different individuals, and I'd like to read to you what some of them had to say of what it was like to work in the fields. You know, another thing is that many people, when they ask me about my book, think that we're talking about migrant workers. And actually, that's not what we're talking about in this book. We're talking about U.S. citizens who came to the Apopka area several generations ago. I want to read to you about what it was like to work on the farms. It was unbelievable. This is part of Geraldine's story. I was 6 years old when I started working. While the woman worked, I babysat their children in the car. And then when there wasn't anyone to babysit, I carried the baskets that the pickings went in. Tomato baskets, bean baskets. We had some called the croaker sacks. Okay? I carried them to the workers at the age of 6, and I started picking beans and potatoes at the age of 6. For the babysitting, I worked from 7:30 in the morning until 6 in the afternoon. And for the bean carrying, from 7:30 in the morning until 7 in the afternoon, if we still had car light. From there, I would set up at the grader and grade the tomatoes, potatoes, and beans. We would grade until 11 o'clock at night and get up the next morning and do the same thing. I started school the next year at 7. I'd go to school at 8 in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, change clothes, and then go to the fields to pick beans till you can't see. We called it dark 30. That's what we called it. We worked until dark 30. So you didn't have time if you was in school. You didn't have time for any studying. That is why most of the farm workers' children don't have good grades in school, because they go to work, and when they come home, they go to bed. And the next morning is school. From school to work, work to bed. So you don't have time to study.